Hello everyone, welcome my YouTube channel. This is what genocide looks like. Russian torture chambers in Kharkiv Oblast, organized rape, civilians shot in the back after their ears were cut off, and swastikas burned into the skin with a soldering iron. A network of Russian torture chambers in Ukraine has been exposed with the deoccupation of the Kharkiv Oblast. Anybody who expressed pro-Ukrainian sentiment was at threat of execution. We have already seen this pattern of Russian war crimes in Bucha, and the Putin regime's premeditated program of genocide against Ukraine is to blame. After the crimes near Kyiv in March of this year, when the Russian army shot at unarmed residents, the Kremlin continues to open the portal into the dark barbaric past of humanity, when ruthless violence, torture, and intimidation were common practice. The rapid deoccupation of the Kharkiv Oblast of Ukraine allowed the police to record Russian war crimes committed in almost every village. Their analysis shows how the aggressor country acts on occupied lands after the promotional pseudo-referendum, which it uses to cover the seizure of new lands. Network of 18 Russian torture chambers found in liberated Kharkiv Oblast, Ukraine from 6 to the 14th of September. About 8,500 square kilometers were liberated in the Kharkiv Oblast, 388 settlements with a population of 150,000. The police said that a network of 18 Russian torture chambers was discovered in the liberated towns of Ukraine. Testimonies collected by the investigators show that during the interrogations of detainees, Russians, particularly from Russia's security service, FSB, often use electric shocks. Representatives of Russian proxy formations from the so-called DNR and LNR, Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics, participate in the illegal detaining of people. This again reminds us that the territory occupied by Russia immediately becomes a training ground for new criminals. There have been frequent cases of murder, robbery, abduction, rape, and intimidation of citizens. Under occupation, all those who show their loyalty to Ukraine become the target of terror. In addition to civic activists, Russia's special services also hunt down former military and law enforcement officials who were not combatants, as well as relatives of people of these categories. Terror in Russia. Sites of executions and burials in Kharkiv Oblast on the eve of the full-scale invasion. The Foreign Policy publication, citing data from American intelligence agencies, reported the existence of a formalized list in Russia, which included, among other things, Ukrainian journalists and activists whom the Kremlin wanted to capture or execute after seizing Ukraine. Consequently, acts of terror were an integral part of the occupation program even before Russian missiles targeted Ukrainian cities. This is similar to the continuation of the Cheka NKVD strategy during the war for Ukrainian lands 100 years ago. At that time, the Bolsheviks formally declared Red Terror in the country. They took representatives of the enemy strata among the population as hostages in the territory occupied by the Red Army. In the Kharkiv Oblast, kidnapping and bullying were also widely used against school teachers who refused to work for Russia. Indiscriminate shelling of residential areas in Kharkiv Oblast. Since many people disappeared without a trace, it is now difficult to establish accurately how many of them were killed and how many were taken to Russia. Currently, most of the bodies found in Kharkiv Oblast are victims of the indiscriminate use of missiles, shells, and bombs by the Russian army on residential premises. A 57-year-old resident of Izium told The Guardian about such shelling. He also reported that Russian soldiers prepared a list of persons to be hunted down, people who may have weapons, rich or dangerous, including businessmen, activists, military and their families. MP of the Izium City Council Maxim Strelnik estimated that at least 1,000 civilians died as a result of military actions in Izium alone. For example, an air bomb that hit a multi-story building in Izium on the 9th of March, when the Russians tried to seize the city, killed about 50 people under the ruins. Therefore, in the improvised cemetery in Izium, which was formed during the occupation of the city by the Russian army, there are, for example, the burial of the Stolpakov family, 31-year-old Olena, her husband, her daughter, as well as her parents, among 445 graves with crosses. Olena Stolpakova with her younger daughter and the place of their burial in Izium. Photo. Radio Liberty. Suspiln. The indiscriminate use of weapons is also evidenced by the fact that on the 22nd of September, prosecutors, together with police officers, while inspecting Kupiansk, a city recently liberated by the Ukrainian army in Kharkiv Oblast, discovered Fab 500 parachuted concrete piercing air bombs, which did not explode. The length of each bomb is more than 2 meters, and the weight of the warhead reaches half a ton. In general, the Kharkiv Oblast Prosecutor's Office reported on September 28 that Russian occupiers killed 56 children in Kharkiv Oblast since the beginning of the war. Ukraine is a test area for Western weapons, says the Minister of Defense. Foreign weapon systems are measured against each other in real combat with Russia. Alexei Reznikov told the media the conflict in Ukraine gives Western arms manufacturers a chance to see which products will do best in a real fight against Russia, the country's defense minister has said. We have a combat test field in Ukraine during this war, Alexei Reznikov explained. We have 8 different 155mm artillery systems in the field, so it's like a competition between the systems to see which one is best. The comments came in an interview with Politico published Tuesday. The idea of the test site was previously expressed by Reznikov's deputy, Vladimir Gavrilov, who claimed that some U.S. defense contractors were setting up their prototypes in Ukraine. Kyiv expects military aid from NATO members to continue to flow into the country for years and wants to take more advantage of it, Reznikov said. For example, Ukraine could start joint ventures with Poland, Great Britain, or Germany to manufacture weapons. We need to develop a UAV, unmanned aerial vehicle, industry not only for aerial drones but also on land and in the sea because that is the future of warfare, he noted. He was also skeptical of restrictions under which supporters of Ukraine send weapons to Kyiv. As the conflict with Russia developed, the US and its allies have repeatedly reconsidered previous decisions not to send heavier weapons, the defense secretary pointed out. I'm really optimistic that Abrams tanks are possible in the future, and I'm sure that fighter jets like the F-16, F-15 or Gripen from Sweden will also be possible, he said. Washington was initially reluctant to provide lethal aid to Ukraine out of concern that Russia would view it as an escalation, but gradually reconsidered and supplied increasingly sophisticated weapons, which Reznikov sees as a favorable trend. Western officials cited logistical problems with training Ukrainian pilots and maintaining the fighter jets among the reasons why Ukraine cannot get the F-16 or F-15. But according to media reports, Kyiv may get them in the long run. Reznikov said European NATO allies look to the United States in their aid decisions, so it was up to Washington to step up. After the first Abrams arrives, I am sure we will have Leopards, Martyrs and other types of heavy armored vehicles like tanks, he told the news agency. Among the weapons most recently designated by the US to Ukraine are NASAMS air defense systems. Washington is also to consider sending some old Hawk surface-to-air missiles it has stored to see if they are still effective. Good day to everyone.